What we've tried to do when thinking about customer needs, and again, Ranjay's book talks about it, it's not so much just surveying them and writing down everything they want and then trying to match your products, in our case, our publications, to those. But we recently rethought about what we should be doing, what's critical for us. And I think in the past we had focused too much on formats. So we were organized roughly around, for our consumer publishing, around the magazine, books, and our nascent online capabilities. So in tough times and turmoil, I agree with Ashish, we try to do something different. So maybe inspired a bit by Ranjay's framework, we reorganized and we actually put together the 3 different siloed units and combined our editorial, because we thought that what we really should focus on are the ideas that inspire or help our readers and different kinds of readers, both established leaders as well as emerging leaders.
Mr. Mujal, if I could come to you now, is there an example in your experience where you have excited the consumer by creating something which he would not have otherwise even thought that he needed?
Yeah, more than one example actually. If you heard of our most successful model, which is the single largest selling model across the globe, the Splendor, sells over 1 million a year. When it became 10 years old, and this was, of course, refreshed over time during the 10 years, talking to the customers and trying to do whatever best we could do. Then we sat back and said, maybe, it's time for us to do something different. Not wait for fatigue to set in, not wait for the customer to say, I don't want to buy any more Splendors. We came up ourselves with a new product. We upgraded it from 100cc to a 125cc engine, giving higher power, higher fuel economy in a 125cc engine, much better looks. And because Splendor was so very successful, so we retained the name of Splendor, we called it Super Splendor.
Fair point. TP, I want to bring you in over here on this issue of in turbulent times, when you're trying to excite the consumer, there are 2 things to do, simple, 2 basic options. One is to do whatever you're doing far better at lower cost, at a lower price, because that's where your consumer is, or to bring something completely new, which is think out of the box. So what is a better approach, or is there a final answer on this?
In my view, Pranjal, is that there is no one right answer, right? Every company has its own strategy, depending on what market you're playing in, depending on what products you sell. So I don't think there's just a one-size-fits-all answer for the question you just asked. However, what I would say is that, at least in markets like in India, it was absolutely critical during the most difficult phases, given the fact that we didn't have the kinds of problems the West had, that we focus on ensuring that we execute on our core business. That was absolutely critical to what our future growth was, ensuring that we execute on core. But at the same time, think of ways to grow our market share during turbulent times, because it's during turbulent times that one can really gain market share on your competitors, and it's very difficult for the competitor to ever catch up again once times pick up again.
Ashish, a broad question. Most of the examples in Ranjay's book are MNCs, the companies that she's talked about. Now, let me put this question to you. Again, in turbulent times, how do you see the pattern of reaction of companies, those who are MNCs looking at multiple markets at the same time, and those who are focused mostly on a single market? There will be a lot of companies who are focused only on the US market, a lot of companies focused only on the Indian markets. Do you see a pattern in the way they react to customers in turbulent times?
The good companies focus on customers in good times or bad times. Ranjay's book talks a lot about overseas companies. I think this is absolutely true in India as well. This kind of a customer-centric approach. In many ways, I would argue that in India we have a paradox. Companies find it harder to take a customer-centric approach because of a couple of reasons. One is most of our companies, and Pawan, no insult, man, are promoter-driven companies. Very strong promoter influence, very clear understanding in terms of what the company was founded on and where the company should be going. So that's one. Second one is, by our heritage, we are expertise driven. We're very functionally oriented. So we are not easily given to working across silos. You know, we pride ourselves on really mastering the silos we are in, whether it be manufacturing, marketing, and so on. So in India, creating a customer-centric or an outside-in company is actually quite a challenge. And we have seen that as we work with different companies. So a couple of things there. One is, a lot of players actually took advantage of this dip that we went through to take a little bit of a breather from the fast-paced growth that they were on, and said, how do we redefine sort of who we are? How do we reorganize the way we can compete when things pick up again? And really take this opportunity to rebase ourselves and reorganize. And a lot of them actually ended up reorganizing, mostly around customers and trying to change their decision processes and so on. And at the same time, we also have a number of unique companies. We keep talking about Bharti. You know, Bharti's clearly created an interesting model. I think Bharti's been very successful historically. One of the dangers about companies that tend to outsource, though, and Ranjay, is that the core becomes smaller and smaller. And the ecosystem around these companies becomes bigger and bigger. And so their share of what we call the profit pool tends to diminish over time when that core market becomes extremely competitive. And I think we are seeing that happening in the telecom space right now.
How difficult is it for Indian companies to reorganize and restructure? What is the sense of inertia that you get from them? Are they quick to change?
So again, it's a complex question you're asking, and I wish there was an easy answer. It's actually relatively difficult in many ways. In some ways we'd argue that they're young companies, a lot of them, and so they should be able to adapt and change very quickly. But again, some of the cultural backgrounds that I just talked about earlier are an impediment. Secondly, they've been so successful in the last 5 years, 6 years, that when you come in there and say, well, what's made you successful when you've gone from 1,000 crores to 3,000, is that same driver really going to be true as you now look to go to 15,000 and 20,000 crores? It's very hard to engage in that dialogue when the track record is actually so successful. And the third thing here, Pranjal, is a lot of companies have simply transplanted business and organizational models from overseas. You know, the companies like a Bharti or like Arvind are few and far in between. So even when you look at consumer product companies, all consumer product companies today operate under the brand and product management model. It's a great model for a developed market where you're trying to gain share for your brand. But in India, where you have to understand your consumer much more tightly and work across silos that are R&D, marketing, product development, manufacturing, service, it's actually not a great model.
Mr. Mujal, do you think that Indian companies find it tougher to change than international companies?
I don't know about the international companies, but for sure, change is not easy. It doesn't come easy. It's very tough. But some companies, some very successful companies, over time, have been, reorganizing and changing with times.
And the bigger you become, the more difficult is it to reorganize?
It surely is. So what you need to do is, you need to have silos in these big companies, but these silos need to talk to each other all the time.
That's an interesting thing. Ranjay, you want to react to this?
Yeah, I think this is the perennial problem I think that Ashish and Pawan have picked up on, is that as long as you have division of labor, the larger you get, the more complex you become, the more you need to create divisions. You need those divisions. You need them to have accountability and focus. Now, and I think as Pawan said right now, and Ashish was saying, is that as long as you have division, you need to connect them. Now, at some point, you might say, I need to break them. Depending on if you've hit a limit of whether it maps to your market, as Ashish was hinting at, or it doesn't. So, but I think silo busting comes at a way, that's when you say, okay, what are the new silos? So you'll always have silos. The question is, how do you connect them and how much do you need to connect them?
Thank you very much for joining us for this panel. I'd like to thank the panelists as well. And thank you for your time and thank you for the panelists.